Your services are no longer required on the quantum team." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and cruel, as Bradley leaned back in his ergonomic chair, a practiced look of regret barely masking his satisfaction. I stood frozen in the doorway of his glass-walled office, my professional smile still fixed in place while something inside me shattered. 5 years of my life, gone with a single sentence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I think it's time we brought in leadership that can take Sentinel to the next level, Bradley continued, his voice deliberately loud enough to carry to the open workspace beyond. Jessica will be taking over as team lead effective immediately. From the corner of my eye, I could see Jessica Miller, my supposed ally, averting her gaze, suddenly fascinated by something on her tablet. The betrayal stung worse than Bradley's. Dismissal. "I've worked with Meridian Global for 5 years, I managed to reply, my voice steadier than I felt. "I built Sentinel's architecture from the ground up. The system is basic," Bradley interrupted. "It's functional, Alex, but hardly innovative. Meridian needs cutting-edge solutions, not adequate ones." He gestured vaguely toward my simple black blazer and practical flats. "Perhaps this is an opportunity to reconsider if enterprise-level development is really your strength." 5 years ago, fresh out of my Ph.D. program where I'd graduated with highest honors, I had made a decision that confused everyone who knew my background. Instead of joining my mentor, Dr. Eleanor Carter's prestigious research institute or accepting lucrative offers from tech giants, I chose a mid-level developer position at Vertex Solutions, a modest software company struggling to find its footing in the competitive Seattle tech landscape. Eleanor had been particularly puzzled. "Alex, you developed an algorithm that could revolutionize how AI processes natural language. Why bury yourself at Vertex?" she'd asked over coffee in her university office. "I need to know I can succeed on my own merits," I'd explained. "Not because of my connection to you or because my dissertation made waves. I want to build something from scratch, where no one knows about the Carter-Chen model." Eleanor had studied me with those penetrating gray eyes that had intimidated generations of computer science students. "Your brilliance doesn't diminish just because you hide it," she'd finally said. "But I understand needing to forge your own path. Just remember, humility shouldn't become self-sabotage." I thought about her words often during those early days. At Vertex, especially when the company landed the Meridian Global account. A stroke of almost miraculous luck for a company our size. The multinational corporation needed a customer service AI solution, and by chance, their CTO had been impressed by a small project I'd completed for a different client. "Let Alex lead this," my original manager had suggested, before Bradley Wilson arrived as our new VP of Product Development. "She has innovative ideas for AI implementation." That was the beginning of the Quantum Team, named for my philosophy that in AI development, the smallest details could create quantum leaps in capability. I'd hand-selected each member, trained them in my methodologies, and built a cohesive unit that functioned like a well-oiled machine. For 5 years, we'd consistently delivered ahead of schedule and beyond expectations, gradually expanding Sentinel's capabilities until Meridian's entire customer service infrastructure ran on our system. But everything changed when Bradley joined Vertex 6 months ago. My first meeting with him should have been a warning. "Impressive resume," he'd said, skimming my file. "Though I notice you didn't leverage your academic background very effectively. Most people with your credentials would be running their own divisions by now." "I prefer focusing on development rather than office politics," I'd replied simply. His smile hadn't reached his eyes. "Well, that explains a lot about your career trajectory." From that moment, Bradley began subtly undermining my authority. First, it was insisting that Jessica, a recent hire with an impressive LinkedIn profile but limited practical experience, be added to the quantum team as my strategic support. Then it was excluding me from client meetings, claiming that Meridian's executives responded better to Jessica's presentation style. Finally, it was reassigning my most essential team members to other projects, one by one. When I'd protested, citing the potential disruption to Sentinel's development roadmap, Bradley had seemed almost pleased. Adaptability is a crucial leadership quality, Alex. If your system is so dependent on specific personnel, perhaps that indicates a fundamental design flaw. Now, walking back to my desk through the maze of suddenly busy coworkers pretending not to have overheard everything, I maintained perfect posture. Another lesson from Eleanor: never let them see you break. The quantum team, my team, watched with expressions ranging from shock to sympathy as I gathered my personal items. Nate Douglas, my most loyal developer, caught up with me at the elevator. "This is insane," he whispered furiously. "Sentinel is your baby. You literally wrote the core algorithm that makes it function." "A simplified version," I corrected automatically. The full capabilities of my algorithm, the one I developed with Eleanor during my doctorate work, remained locked away. A deliberate choice to prove I could build something successful from scratch. "Whatever," Nate continued. "The point is, Jessica doesn't understand half of what makes Sentinel work. She's all presentation and no substance." I squeezed his arm gratefully. "It'll be okay. Maybe this is the push I needed to move on." But as the elevator doors closed, separating me from the team I'd built and nurtured for 5 years, I felt anything but okay. I felt hollow, betrayed, and, for the first time in my professional life, genuinely angry. My apartment in Capitol Hill was modest but comfortable. I could have afforded something more upscale with my Vertex salary, but like my practical wardrobe and my 5-year-old Honda, my living situation reflected a deliberate choice. I didn't want the trappings of success handed to me because of my connection to the Carter family. I wanted to earn them through my own efforts. Now, staring at my living room wall covered in sketches and diagrams of Sentinel's next-generation capabilities, plans that would now never be implemented under my guidance, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. All those years of holding back, of deliberately simplifying my work to prove I could build something from fundamentals rather than relying on my breakthrough algorithm. Had it been worth it? My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Dinner. Tomorrow? Got something interesting to discuss." I texted back a quick confirmation, then pulled up my laptop. Maybe it was time to update my resume after all. The next day brought a flurry of messages from quantum team members. Apparently, Jessica had called an emergency meeting to discuss the transition and had been unable to answer basic questions about Sentinel's architecture. According to Nate, she'd grown increasingly flustered before declaring that they would circle back after some knowledge transfer. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt worried for my team. And yes, despite Bradley's decisions, they were still my team in my heart. They'd be the ones facing client frustration and impossible deadlines if Sentinel faltered. Eleanor was already seated at our favorite Thai restaurant when I arrived that evening, a glass of wine in hand and a tablet beside her plate. "You look terrible," she greeted me with her characteristic bluntness. "Charming as always, Eleanor," I replied, sliding into the booth. "I mean it as a professional observation, not an insult." She pushed a glass of wine toward me. "You're pale, your posture is rigid even by your standards, and you've worn the same conservative black blazer you always wear when you're feeling insecure." I took a long sip of wine instead of acknowledging how accurately she'd read me. "So, what's this interesting thing you wanted to discuss?" Eleanor's eyes sparkled with an excitement I recognized from my graduate school days. It usually preceded either a breakthrough or a particularly audacious proposal. "Nexus Technologies has approached me about heading up their new AI division," she said. They want to revolutionize enterprise-level business solutions, and they're willing to invest serious resources. That's impressive, I replied, genuinely happy for her but unsure why this required a dinner meeting. It's not just impressive, it's perfect timing. She leaned forward. I told them I'd only accept the position if I could bring in my own team, starting with my brilliant former student who created the Carter-Chen model. My heart skipped a beat. Eleanor, Before you give me your usual speech about making it on your own merits, she interrupted, let me clarify. I'm not offering you a position because you're my protege. I'm offering because Nexus specifically asked about implementing natural language processing capabilities similar to what you developed. You're objectively the best person for this job. I stared into my wine glass, conflict churning inside me. I just got pushed off the team I built from nothing. Taking a position through your connection feels like admitting defeat. Eleanor sighed. Alex, your insistence on earning everything the hard way isn't nobility. It's self-sabotage. You've spent 5 years deliberately underusing your talents to prove some point about meritocracy, while working for people who can't even recognize what you're capable of. Her words stung because they contained more than a grain of truth. Besides, she continued more gently, this isn't a handout. Nexus is hosting their annual Innovation Summit at Alpine Ridge next month. Their executive team and major investors will be there. I've arranged for you to present a demonstration of your choosing, not as my former student, but as an AI architect being considered for a leadership position. Alpine Ridge? I repeated, the name triggering a memory. Wait, isn't that the resort my family has owned for 3 generations? Yes. Eleanor smiled mischievously. Though that's not common knowledge in the tech world, and I see no reason to mention it during the summit. I couldn't help laughing at the irony. So your plan is for me to demonstrate my abilities at your family's resort while pretending we don't have a prior connection? Eleanor shrugged. Not exactly. I'm not suggesting we hide our academic relationship. That would be dishonest. I'm suggesting you finally stop hiding what you're truly capable of. Show them the full potential of your algorithm, not the watered-down version you implemented at Vertex. I fell silent, considering her proposal. Part of me wanted to refuse on principle, to find another mid-level position and once again work my way up through sheer determination. But another part, the part that had spent 5 years watching less qualified people take credit for my innovations, was tired of the constant uphill battle. I'll think about it, I finally said. Eleanor nodded, knowing better than to push. That's all I ask. Now tell me exactly what happened with this Bradley person. I want details. By the time I left the restaurant 2 hours later, I felt lighter than I had in days. Eleanor had always had that effect on me, her razor-sharp analysis cutting through emotional turmoil to expose the logical path forward, but I still hadn't committed to her proposal. That changed the next morning when my phone exploded with notifications. Nate was calling, while simultaneous text messages poured in from other Quantum team members. I answered Nate's call first. Complete disaster, he said without preamble. Jessica presented to Meridian's CTO this morning. She couldn't explain how Sentinel prioritizes customer intent recognition, and when he asked about the upcoming neural network expansion, she tried to bluff her way through. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. How bad was it? Bad enough that Meridian's CTO asked where you were and why you weren't leading the presentation. Nate's voice had a hint of satisfaction despite the seriousness of the situation. Jessica. Panicked and said you'd left the company. He did not take it well. What happened next? Bradley got called in. Emergency damage control. They're in the conference room now. I could hear the smile in Nate's voice. Thought you might want to know that the system started throwing errors about 20 minutes after the meeting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jessica can't figure out why, and Jason's attempt to patch it only made things worse. I sat up straighter. What kind of errors? Something in the core language processing module. It's like Sentinel suddenly doesn't understand basic commands. That was because Sentinel's natural language processing had been custom-built by me, using principles derived from my doctoral research but deliberately simplified. The documentation explained how it worked, but not why. Because explaining the why would have meant revealing too much about the Carter-Chen model. "They're going to call you," Nate predicted. Bradley looked like he was about to have an aneurysm when the client left. As if on cue, my phone indicated another incoming call from Bradley's direct line. I let it go to voicemail. "Thanks for the update, Nate. I appreciate you looking out for me." After hanging up, I listened to Bradley's voicemail. His usually confident voice sounded strained as he asked, not demanded, but asked, if I could call him back regarding an urgent Sentinel situation. Instead of returning his call, I texted Eleanor. "I'm in. Let's show Nexus what the full Carter-Chen model can do." Her response came immediately. "Excellent. Alpine Ridge awaits. And Alex? Wear something that actually reflects your brilliance for once." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. By day, I ignored increasingly desperate messages from Vertex, first from Bradley, then from the CEO himself. By night, I worked with Eleanor to develop a demonstration that would showcase the true capabilities of my algorithm. "We'll need test data," Eleanor mused during one of our planning sessions in her university office. "I've been thinking about that," I replied, pulling up a file on my laptop. "What if we use Meridian's publicly available customer service transcripts? Their data is anonymized but extensive, and it would demonstrate real-world application." Eleanor's eyebrows rose approvingly. "Showcasing your solution on data from Vertex's biggest client? That's deliciously strategic." I grinned. I learned from the best. 2 days before the Innovation Summit, Eleanor flew to Aspen to oversee final preparations at Alpine Ridge. I would follow the next day, giving me one last afternoon to perfect my presentation. My phone rang as I was rehearsing my opening remarks. Unknown number, but the Seattle area code made me suspect it was yet another Vertex executive trying a different phone to reach me. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Alex Chen." My voice was professional but cool. "Alex, thank God." It was Jessica, sounding nothing like the confident woman who had taken my position. Her voice was high with stress. "I know I have no right to ask for your help, but Sentinel is completely non-functional, and Meridian is threatening to terminate their contract if we don't fix it by the end of the week." "That sounds like a problem for you and Bradley to solve," I replied, surprised by my own coldness. "Please," she practically begged. "None of us understand the core algorithm like you do. Bradley made a huge mistake, and he knows it. He's willing to offer you your team back, plus a promotion to Director of AI Development." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "So Bradley's willing to give me back what was already mine? How generous." "Alex, I'm sorry. I never should have." She stopped, then continued more quietly. "I thought aligning with Bradley was the smart career move. I didn't realize how much of Sentinel's success was directly attributable to your architecture. Her admission should have felt vindicating. Instead, it just made me sad." Another talented woman who thought the only path forward was attaching herself to men in power, rather than recognizing her own potential. "Jessica, let me give you some advice," I said, softening my tone slightly. "Your technical skills are solid. You don't need to be Bradley's puppet to advance. But right now, I'm not interested in salvaging a situation that Bradley created. I'll be out of town for the next week at the Alpine Ridge Innovation Summit. Perhaps when I return, we can discuss what a proper offer might look like." I ended the call before she could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. Tomorrow, I would board a plane to Aspen, and the next chapter of my career would begin, on my terms, with my full capabilities on display. Alpine Ridge Resort emerged. From the mountainside like a modern castle of glass and stone, its elegant architecture complementing rather than competing with the breathtaking natural surroundings. As my car wound up the private road toward the main entrance, I felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. This wasn't just another tech conference, it was my opportunity to finally step into the light. Eleanor had texted that she would meet me inside, so I straightened my new outfit, a tailored burgundy suit that had cost more than I usually spent on clothes in a year, and stepped out of the car. The resort staff efficiently whisked away my luggage while I approached the imposing entrance. The lobby soared 3 stories high, dominated by a wall of windows framing a spectacular view of snow-capped mountains. Tech industry elites mingled in small groups, many wearing name badges with the Nexus Technologies logo prominently displayed. "Ms. Chen?" A staff member approached with a warm smile. "Dr. Carter asked me to escort you directly to the presidential suite when you arrived. The welcome reception begins in 1 hour." As we rode the private elevator to the top floor, I checked my phone out of habit. 27 missed calls from various Vertex numbers, plus a new email from Bradley with the subject line, "Urgent, CEO approval for your return." I put the phone away without reading further. Whatever crisis was unfolding at Vertex would have to wait. The presidential suite took up half of the top floor, with panoramic views and luxurious furnishings that somehow managed to feel both opulent and tasteful. Eleanor was waiting inside, immaculate as always in a charcoal gray suit. "Perfect timing," she greeted me. "I was just reviewing the attendee list. Jack Morrison, Nexus's CEO, is particularly interested in your presentation tomorrow." She gave my new outfit an approving nod. "You clean up nicely when you actually try." "Should we discuss how we're handling questions about our relationship?" I asked, placing my presentation materials on the suite's elegant desk. "Professionally and honestly," Eleanor replied. "You were my doctoral student. We developed the Carter-Chen model together, and we've maintained a collegial relationship. There's no need to either highlight or hide our connection." I nodded, relieved. "And the fact that your family owns this resort?" "Irrelevant to the proceedings." She waved dismissively. "Most people here don't know, and those who do understand, it's not pertinent to your capabilities." An hour later, we descended to the resort's grand ballroom, which had been transformed into an elegant reception space. I recognized several tech industry luminaries from magazine covers and TED Talks, mingling over champagne and gourmet hors d'oeuvres. "Alex!" Eleanor called me over to where she stood with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. "I'd like you to meet Jack Morrison, CEO of Nexus Technologies." Morrison's handshake was firm, his gaze appraising but not unkind. "Dr. Carter speaks very highly of your work, Ms. Chen. I'm particularly interested in your insights on natural language processing for enterprise applications." We fell into a comfortable technical discussion, with me carefully balancing between demonstrating my expertise and saving the most impressive revelations for my formal presentation. Other Nexus executives joined our circle, each asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in my approach. This, I realized with a start, was how professional respect felt, being valued for my mind rather than undermined at every turn. The contrast with my experience at Vertex couldn't have been starker. As I excused myself to get a fresh drink, I heard a commotion near the ballroom entrance. A man's voice, loud and insistent, was arguing with the resort staff. "I understand there's a private event, but this is an emergency. I need to speak with Alex Chen immediately." I froze, recognizing Bradley's voice before I saw him. What was he doing here? How had he even known where to find me? Eleanor appeared at my elbow, her expression concerned. "Problem?" Before I could respond, Bradley pushed past the staff and into the ballroom, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on me. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, tie loosened, hair uncombed, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Alex?" he called out, striding toward me with desperate determination. "Thank God. You have to come back. Meridian is threatening to pull their entire contract. Their system is crashing hourly, and none of our team can stabilize it." A hush fell over the nearby conversations as tech executives turned to observe the unfolding drama. Bradley seemed oblivious to the attention, focused solely on me. "I made a terrible mistake," he continued, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "The quantum team is yours. Director title, double your previous salary, whatever you want. Just please come back and fix Sentinel." Eleanor stepped forward, her posture protective. "I believe you're interrupting a private reception, Mr. Wilson. Bradley Wilson, VP of Product Development at Vertex Solutions." He extended his hand, which Eleanor pointedly ignored. "And you've traveled all the way to Aspen to make a scene because—" Eleanor's tone could have frozen fire. Bradley finally seemed to register his surroundings, taking in the elegant space and the distinguished guests watching with interest. This is an emergency situation. Our largest client is about to terminate their contract because the AI system Alex developed is failing, and no one else understands how to fix it." "Fascinating," Eleanor replied coolly. "So you removed the architect of a mission-critical system from her own team, and now you're surprised that the system is failing without her expertise?" Jack Morrison stepped forward, interest piqued. "Alex, is this the implementation you mentioned? The customer service AI for Meridian Global?" I nodded, acutely aware of all eyes on me. "Mr. Wilson," Morrison addressed Bradley directly, "I believe you've just provided the most compelling endorsement Ms. Chen could have hoped for. If your company is falling apart without her expertise after just 3 weeks, imagine what she could build with proper support and recognition." Bradley's face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and desperation. "This isn't about corporate politics. Meridian Global generates 40% of our annual revenue. Without that contract, Vertex might not survive." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Despite everything, the quantum team, my team, would suffer if Vertex collapsed. People who had nothing to do with Bradley's decisions would lose their jobs. "Perhaps you should have considered that before reassigning Ms. Chen," Eleanor said, voicing the thought I couldn't bring myself to express. A resort manager appeared, beside Bradley. "Sir, I'm afraid I need to escort you out. This is a private function." "Wait," I said, surprising myself. I turned to Bradley. "I'll look at the system, remotely tonight from my laptop. I'll stabilize it enough to prevent immediate failure. But I won't be returning to Vertex, and any long-term solution will require a formal consultation agreement at my new consulting rates." Relief flooded Bradley's face, quickly followed by calculation. "And those rates would be 5 times my former salary, plus proper attribution for all my work on Sentinel, including in any marketing materials or client presentations." The terms fell from my lips with surprising ease. Non-negotiable. Bradley swallowed hard but nodded. "Agreed. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork immediately." As the resort staff led him away, Jack Morrison turned to me with newfound respect. "Impressive negotiation, Ms. Chen. Most people would have either refused entirely or capitulated to the pressure." "The system's failure isn't the fault of the developers still working on it," I explained. "They deserve a chance to succeed without being sabotaged by poor leadership decisions." "Compassionate and strategic," Morrison noted. "Exactly the kind of leadership Nexus is looking for." He handed me his business card with a direct number written on the back. "After your presentation tomorrow, I'd like to discuss a more permanent position. We're building something special at Nexus, and I believe you could play a significant role." Later that night, in the presidential suite, I remotely accessed Sentinel's code and quickly identified the cascade of errors that had brought the system to its knees. As suspected, Jessica and the others had attempted to modify the core language processing module without understanding its underlying architecture, creating conflicts that rippled throughout the system. Within 2 hours, I had stabilized the most critical functions and left detailed notes for the team on how to proceed. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it would keep Sentinel functioning long enough for Vertex to either retain me as a consultant or transition to a different solution. Eleanor watched from the suite's living area, sipping a glass of wine. "You know, you could have let them crash and burn. No one would have blamed you." I closed my laptop and joined her on the sofa. That would have punished the wrong people. "True leadership," she observed, putting the welfare of the team above personal vindication. "I learned from the best," I replied, raising my own glass in a toast. The next morning, I stood before a room filled with tech industry leaders, investors, and innovation scouts. My presentation on the full capabilities of the Carter-Chen model, not the simplified version I'd implemented at Vertex, but the revolutionary algorithm in its complete form, was met with rapt attention and thoughtful questions. When I demonstrated how the algorithm could not only respond to customer inquiries, but actually anticipate needs based on subtle linguistic patterns, the room erupted in spontaneous applause. Jack Morrison's expression confirmed what Eleanor had predicted. Nexus wasn't just interested, they were eager. As I concluded, I noticed a familiar face slipping into the back of the room. Nate Douglas, my most loyal developer from the quantum team, gave me a thumbs up and a wide grin. Later, as attendees networked over coffee, Nate made his way to me through the crowd. "That was incredible," he said, eyes bright with excitement. "I had no idea Sentinel was capable of all that. Why didn't you implement the full version at Vertex?" "I was trying to prove I could build something from fundamental principles," I admitted. "I wanted success based on solid engineering, not just applying my doctoral research." "Well, Bradley's face when he saw the stable system this morning was almost worth all the chaos," Nate laughed, though he tried to take credit for bringing you back to save the day. Of course he had. Some things never changed. "Actually," Nate continued more seriously, "I'm here for more than just moral support. Half the quantum team is ready to follow you wherever you go next. We've learned more from you than from anyone else, and we don't want that to end because Bradley made a power play." I was touched by their loyalty, but not entirely surprised. We'd built something special together, not just a software system, but a team culture based on innovation, collaboration, and mutual respect. "I might have something in the works," I told him, glancing toward where Jack Morrison was deep in conversation with Eleanor. "Something that would allow us to build without artificial constraints or political games." 6 months later, I stood in my new office at Nexus Technologies, overlooking Seattle's skyline from a much higher vantage point than I'd ever had at Vertex. As Director of Advanced AI Solutions, I led a team that included Nate and 5 other former quantum team members, along with new talent recruited specifically for their innovative thinking. On my desk sat 2 meaningful objects, a small quantum computing sculpture gifted by my team, and a framed news article announcing Vertex's acquisition by a larger firm after losing the Meridian Global contract when Sentinel suffered a catastrophic failure under Jessica's leadership. Bradley, according to industry gossip, had been quietly let go during the acquisition. Jessica had reached out to apologize again and ask for career advice, which I had given honestly, encouraging her to trust her technical skills rather than political maneuvering. As for me, I no longer hid my capabilities or my connection to Eleanor. The Carter-Chen model, fully implemented and continuously improved by our team at Nexus, was revolutionizing how AI systems interacted with customers. Across multiple industries, for the first time in my career, I was recognized not just for what I could do, but for who I was. A brilliant developer who led with both technical excellence and genuine care for her team. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Meridian Global CEO called. They want to meet about implementing our system to replace the failed Sentinel project." I smiled as I typed my response. Tell them we'd be delighted to discuss it, and suggest the meeting take place at Alpine Ridge. I hear the presidential suite has excellent views for strategic planning. Some might call it poetic justice, but I preferred to think of it as quantum karma, the smallest decisions eventually creating the biggest waves of change. Bradley had taken my team away after I'd built it for 5 years, but in doing so, he'd inadvertently pushed me toward something far greater than I would have achieved by playing small. Success, I had finally learned, didn't come from hiding your light. It came from letting it shine so brightly that others could find their way by it. For the next 2 weeks, I worked from home, diving deep into documentation and analyzing exactly what had gone wrong with Sentinel. The system logs told a disturbing story. Immediately after my removal, Jessica had attempted to revise the core algorithm without understanding its fundamental architecture. She'd made what looked like minor changes to the natural language processing module, but those small alterations had cascaded throughout the system, corrupting Sentinel's ability to recognize user intent. Each morning, my inbox contained increasingly desperate messages from Bradley. What had started as imperious demands, require immediate consultation on Sentinel issues, had evolved into outright pleas. Please respond. Meridian threatening contract termination. I responded only with clinical technical notes, detailing exactly what the quantum team needed to address, but offering no implementation guidance. From Nate, I received more candid updates. The office atmosphere had turned toxic. Bradley was micromanaging the team, demanding hourly progress reports while simultaneously refusing to acknowledge that removing me had been a mistake. Jessica oscillated between blaming the original code architecture and claiming she just needed more time to implement her vision. Meanwhile, Meridian's customer service ratings had plummeted as Sentinel struggled to process even basic queries. "They're talking about bringing in external consultants," Nate texted on a Wednesday evening. "Bradley's telling everyone it's because we need fresh perspectives, but everyone knows it's because we're drowning." I might have felt vindicated if I weren't so concerned for my former team. They were talented developers caught in a political crossfire, and their careers shouldn't suffer because of Bradley's ego. That concern prompted me to respond more substantively to Bradley's latest email, offering to review the system remotely and provide high-level guidance, with the explicit condition that my contribution be properly credited. His response arrived. Within minutes. "Whatever you need. Name your price." That evening, I logged into Sentinel's backend for the first time since my departure. What I found was worse than expected. The elegant architecture I'd spent years refining had been brutalized by panicked quick fixes and incompatible additions. It would take weeks to properly rebuild what had been damaged in mere days. I documented my findings in a detailed report, concluding with a stark assessment. Sentinel requires comprehensive architectural restoration before any new features can be implemented. The current approach of symptomatic fixes is exacerbating fundamental instabilities. After sending the report, I turned my focus to my upcoming presentation at Alpine Ridge. Eleanor and I had daily video conferences, refining the demonstration that would showcase the full capabilities of the Carter-Chen model. Unlike the watered-down version I'd implemented at Vertex, this would reveal what the algorithm could truly do when unleashed. "Are you sure about using Meridian's public data for the demonstration?" Eleanor asked during one session, her expression concerned even through the video call. "It might appear vindictive." "It's not about vindication," I insisted. "Meridian's dataset is perfect because it represents real-world complexity. Their customer service interactions include multiple languages, technical jargon, and emotional contexts that showcase why our model outperforms standard NLP approaches." She nodded slowly. "Just be prepared for questions about your history with Vertex. Jack Morrison isn't known for beating around the bush. I'll be honest without being bitter, I promised. This isn't about Bradley or what happened at Vertex. It's about showing what I can build when given the freedom to innovate." 3 days before I was scheduled to leave for Aspen, Bradley called again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me, curiosity perhaps, prompted me to answer. Alex. His voice had lost its usual authoritative resonance. We've implemented the changes you recommended, but Sentinel is still experiencing critical failures. That's because the changes I recommended were the beginning of a recovery process, not a complete solution, I replied evenly. How long would a complete solution take? With the right team, 3 weeks of intensive rebuilding. He exhaled heavily. Meridian's giving us 1 week. After that, they're terminating the contract. I should have felt some satisfaction knowing that his poor decisions had led to this crisis, but all I felt was regret for the wasted potential. The quantum team had built something remarkable, only to see it dismantled through mismanagement. I'm sorry to hear that, I said finally, but I'm preparing for the Alpine Ridge Innovation Summit and won't be available for on-site work until after that concludes. Alpine Ridge? Bradley's voice sharpened with interest. The tech conference? I didn't realize you were presenting. I was invited by Dr. Eleanor Carter to demonstrate the full capabilities of our collaborative research, I replied, deliberately emphasizing Eleanor's name. It was well known in tech circles. If Bradley had done even minimal research on me before, sidelining me, he would have discovered the connection. The silence on his end suggested he was rapidly recalculating. I see. Is there any way you could consult remotely before your presentation? Meridian specifically asked for you by name during yesterday's call. I'm already consulting remotely, I reminded him. My recommendations are in the documentation I've provided. If you need more direct intervention, my consulting rates apply. I named a figure that was deliberately steep, 5 times my former salary, calculated hourly. I expected haggling or outrage. Instead, Bradley immediately agreed. Fine. Send the paperwork to HR and they'll process it immediately. His quick capitulation spoke volumes about how dire Vertex's situation had become. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Should I be doing more to save the system I'd built? Then I remembered how easily he had dismissed 5 years of my work, how casually he had removed me from my own team. I'll send the consulting agreement over shortly, but understand that even with my guidance, fixing what's been broken will take time. The system architecture was altered in ways that can't be quickly reversed. Just do what you can, he replied, defeat evident in his voice. After we hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. I need your advice, I said when she answered, and possibly a reality check. She listened without interruption as I explained the situation with Vertex and my conflicted feelings about letting Sentinel fail. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before responding. You've always had a strong sense of responsibility, she observed. It's one of your finest qualities, but there's a difference between responsibility and martyrdom. I'm not martyring myself, I objected. I'm just concerned about the collateral damage. The developers on that team don't deserve to have their hard work wasted because Bradley made poor leadership decisions. True, Eleanor acknowledged. But consider this. You're about to demonstrate the full capabilities of your algorithm at Alpine Ridge, potentially launching the next phase of your career. Is this the moment to get pulled back into Vertex's drama? She had a point. My preparation for Alpine Ridge required full focus, and Bradley's problems weren't mine to solve. Not anymore. Maybe there's a middle path, I suggested. I could provide enough guidance to stabilize the immediate crisis without getting fully reinvested in Vertex's problems. That sounds reasonable, Eleanor agreed. Just be clear about your boundaries. Bradley strikes me as the type who will take a mile if offered an inch. That afternoon, I drafted a detailed consulting agreement that specified limited hours and a strictly advisory role. I would review code and suggest solutions but would not write a single line of code myself. My name would be prominently credited in all communications with Meridian regarding Sentinel's recovery. The agreement was returned with Bradley's signature within the hour. For the next 3 days, I split my time between Alpine Ridge preparation and Sentinel consultation. I held video conferences with the quantum team, walking them through the architectural issues and outlining a recovery strategy. Nate and 2 of the senior developers caught on quickly, but Jessica remained notably quiet during these sessions, her expression alternating between resentment and confusion. During one call, when I was explaining how the intent recognition module interacted with the response generation system, Jessica finally spoke up. "This is unnecessarily complex," she stated flatly. "If we just implemented standard industry practices instead of your custom architecture, we wouldn't be having these problems." The team fell silent, clearly uncomfortable with her confrontational tone. "Industry standard practices wouldn't achieve Sentinel's performance metrics," I replied calmly. "That's why Meridian chose our solution over competitors in the first place." "Then you should have documented your approach better," she countered. I pulled up the internal wiki on my screen and shared my display. Page 47 of the architectural documentation explains exactly how these modules interact, including diagrams of the data flow. Jessica flushed. "That's unnecessarily technical. No one has time to read all that." "Actually," Nate interjected, "most of us did read it. That's how we've been able to maintain our modules effectively." The tension was palpable, even through the video call. I decided to redirect the conversation back to solutions rather than blame. "Let's focus on the recovery plan," I suggested. "The priority is stabilizing the core language processing functions so Meridian's customer service operations can return to normal function." By the end of the 3rd day, we had made modest progress. Sentinel was still throwing errors, but the frequency had decreased from hourly to daily. It wasn't a complete recovery, but it bought some time. Time that Bradley desperately needed to salvage the Meridian relationship. The night before my flight to Aspen, I received an unexpected call from Vertex's CEO, Thomas Green. "Alex, I hope I'm not calling too late," he began, his tone conciliatory. "I wanted to personally thank you for your assistance with the Sentinel situation. Bradley has kept me updated on your consulting work. I'm glad I could help stabilize the system," I replied neutrally. "About your departure from Vertex," he continued, "I want you to know that I wasn't fully informed about the circumstances. Had I known the extent of your contributions to Sentinel's architecture, I would have intervened in Bradley's decision." His admission was validating, but also raised questions about the company's leadership structure. How could the CEO be unaware of who had built their flagship product? "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "Which brings me to the purpose of my call," Green continued. "I'd like to discuss your potential return to Vertex, with significant changes to your role and compensation, perhaps as our new Chief Technology Officer, with Bradley reporting to you." The offer was so unexpected that I laughed involuntarily. "I'm sorry, but are you serious?" "Completely serious," Green confirmed. "Meridian has made it clear that their continued relationship with Vertex depends on your involvement with Sentinel. We're willing to create a position that reflects your true value to the company." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of downplaying my abilities to prove I could succeed on merit alone, I was now being offered a C-suite position precisely because I had become indispensable. "I'm flattered by the offer," I said, choosing my words carefully. "But I'm currently exploring other opportunities that align better with my long-term goals. I'm presenting at the Alpine Ridge Innovation Summit tomorrow, and my focus needs to be there right now." "Alpine Ridge?" Green sounded impressed. "That's an exclusive gathering. May I ask what you're presenting?" "The full capabilities of the Carter-Chen model," I replied. "The natural language processing algorithm I developed with Dr. Eleanor Carter during my doctoral work." There was a pause on the line as Green likely recognized the significance. I see. Well, our offer remains open. Perhaps we could continue the conversation after the summit concludes? I'll consider it, I promised, though in truth my mind was already moving forward, away from Vertex and toward the possibilities that Alpine Ridge might bring. After ending the call, I finished packing for Aspen, taking special care with my presentation materials and the new wardrobe I'd purchased for the occasion. For years, I'd defaulted to understated clothing, avoiding anything that might draw attention. Now I was deliberately choosing items that projected confidence and expertise, a subtle but significant shift in how I presented myself to the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Weather perfect in Aspen. Resort staff eagerly awaiting your arrival. Get some sleep. Tomorrow begins a new chapter. She was right, of course. Whatever happened at Alpine Ridge, it would mark a turning point in my career. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about the future. My flight departed Seattle early the next morning, carrying me away from the familiar skyline toward the Rocky Mountains and the opportunities awaiting at Alpine Ridge. As the plane climbed through the clouds, I found myself thinking not about what I was leaving behind, but about what lay ahead. The private terminal at Aspen's airport was a study in understated luxury: polished wood, soft leather seating, and discreet staff who efficiently managed luggage and transportation. A sleek black SUV with the Alpine Ridge logo emblazoned on the door waited on the tarmac, driver standing at attention beside it. Ms. Chen, welcome to Aspen, he greeted me. I'm Ryan, your designated driver during your stay. Dr. Carter asked me to bring you directly to the resort. She's finalizing preparations for tomorrow's presentations. The drive to Alpine Ridge took us through breathtaking mountain scenery, dense forests of pine and aspen giving way to sweeping vistas of snow-capped peaks. Though I'd seen photos of the resort in Eleanor's family portfolio, they hadn't captured the way it seemed to emerge organically from the mountainside, its modern architecture harmonizing with the natural surroundings rather than competing with them. Ryan pulled up to a private entrance away from the main lobby. Dr. Carter suggested you might prefer to avoid the main reception area for now. Several tech executives have already arrived, including some from Vertex Solutions. I froze. From Vertex? Who specifically? I believe Mr. Wilson checked in about an hour ago, along with a Ms. Miller, Bradley, and Jessica. Here. The coincidence seemed too perfect to be accidental. Had Bradley somehow arranged to attend after learning I would be presenting? Or was this part of a larger strategy to pressure me into returning to Vertex? Is there a problem, Ms. Chen? Ryan asked, noting my expression. No problem, I assured him, though my mind was racing. Just unexpected. A discreet elevator whisked me directly to the presidential suite, where Eleanor waited, reviewing documents at a magnificent desk positioned to take advantage of the panoramic mountain views. Alex! She rose to greet me with a warm embrace. Perfect timing. I was just going through the final attendee list. She stopped, studying my expression. What's wrong? Bradley Wilson and Jessica Miller are here, I explained, setting down my carry-on bag. They checked in an hour ago. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. That's interesting timing. The summit has been sold out for months, and Vertex wasn't on the original attendee list. Could they have been invited recently? Possibly. Eleanor tapped her tablet thoughtfully. Jack Morrison sometimes extends last-minute invitations if he sees strategic value. But more likely, they purchased passes from another company that decided not to attend. It happens occasionally. This can't be coincidence, I said, pacing the elegant living area of the suite. Bradley only learned about the summit 3 days ago, during our call about Sentinel. Does it matter? Eleanor asked practically. You're here to demonstrate your capabilities to Nexus and other potential partners. Bradley's presence is irrelevant to that goal. She was right, of course. I had spent too long allowing Bradley's actions to dictate my emotional state. His presence at Alpine Ridge changed nothing about my presentation or its potential impact. "You're right," I acknowledged. "I just didn't expect to face them again so soon, especially here." "Consider it an opportunity," Eleanor suggested with a slight smile. "Now they can witness firsthand as you showcase what you're truly capable of." The next few hours were spent in final preparation. Eleanor had arranged for the resort's technical team to set up the presentation room exactly to my specifications, with redundant systems to ensure nothing would interfere with the demonstration. We ran through the sequence twice, fine-tuning transitions and discussing potential questions from the audience. At 5 o'clock, we headed down to the welcome reception in one of the resort's elegant lounges. The room was already filling with tech industry leaders when we arrived. CEOs of innovative startups, venture capitalists known for funding groundbreaking projects, and representatives from established companies looking to stay ahead of the innovation curve. Jack Morrison, Nexus Technologies' CEO, spotted us immediately and made his way through the crowd. In person, he was more imposing than his photos suggested. Tall and broad-shouldered, with keen eyes that seemed to assess and analyze everything they fell upon. "Dr. Carter, perfect timing," he greeted Eleanor warmly before turning to me. "And you must be Alexandra Chen. Your reputation precedes you." "Just Alex, please," I replied, shaking his offered hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morrison." "Jack," he insisted. "We don't stand on formality at Nexus. Eleanor tells me your work in natural language processing is revolutionary." "That might be overstating things," I demurred automatically, then caught Eleanor's warning glance. Old habits died hard. "But I am excited to demonstrate capabilities that go beyond current industry standards," I added more confidently. "I look forward to it," Jack replied, "particularly in light of recent market developments. Did you know Meridian Global announced today that they're reviewing all their tech partnerships? Apparently, their customer service metrics have plummeted due to some AI implementation failure." My stomach tightened. I wasn't aware they had made a public announcement. "Just hit the business wires this afternoon," Jack confirmed. "Sent their stock down 3% in late trading. Word is they're looking for a replacement solution immediately." Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the ambient conversation. "Alex Chen. I thought that might be you on the presenter list." I turned to find Bradley approaching, Jessica trailing slightly behind him. He had made an effort with his appearance, designer suit, freshly trimmed hair, but couldn't hide the strain around his eyes or the slight desperation in his smile. "Bradley," I acknowledged coolly. "I'm surprised to see you here." "Last-minute opportunity," he replied smoothly. Thomas felt it was important for Vertex to have representation at such a prestigious gathering. His gaze shifted to Eleanor and Jack. "Bradley Wilson, VP of Product Development at Vertex Solutions, and this is Jessica Miller, our lead AI architect." I caught the subtle glance Eleanor and Jack exchanged at Bradley's introduction of Jessica. They weren't fooled by the impressive title. "Eleanor Carter," my mentor introduced herself without extending her hand. "And this is Jack Morrison, CEO of Nexus Technologies." Bradley's expression flickered with momentary panic as he recognized Jack's name. Nexus was a major player in the enterprise software space, a potential competitor to Vertex, but more significantly, a company known for aggressive recruitment of top talent. "Mr. Morrison, it's an honor," Bradley recovered quickly. "Vertex has long admired Nexus's innovative approach to enterprise solutions." "Interesting," Jack replied, his tone neutral but his gaze evaluative. "I understand you're currently facing some challenges with your Meridian Global implementation. Something about system instabilities?" Bradley's smile tightened. "A temporary setback. We're implementing an architectural redesign that will resolve the issues shortly." "Under Alex's guidance, I understand," Jack noted casually. The comment hung in the air like a perfectly aimed dart. Bradley flushed while Jessica suddenly became very interested in her drink. "Alex has been kind enough to provide some consultation," Bradley acknowledged stiffly. "How fortunate for Vertex that she was willing to help after being removed from her own team," Eleanor observed, her tone pleasant, but her meaning unmistakable. The tension was thick enough to cut. Jack, seeming to relish the discomfort his comment had created, turned back to me with a genuine smile. "Alex, I'd love to hear more about your presentation tomorrow. Perhaps you could join me for dinner? I've reserved a private dining room with a few key investors who are particularly interested in natural language processing applications." It was a deliberate rescue and a power move all at once, extracting me from an uncomfortable confrontation while simultaneously signaling Bradley that I had options and allies. "I'd be delighted," I replied, relief and gratitude mingling in my voice. "Excellent." Jack offered his arm gallantly. "Eleanor, you'll join us, of course." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied with a satisfied smile. As we turned to leave, Bradley stepped forward. "Alex, perhaps we could speak privately later. There are some aspects of the Sentinel situation I'd like to discuss directly." I hesitated, torn between the desire to avoid further engagement and the responsibility I still felt toward the system I had built. "I'll be rather busy with presentation preparations," I replied finally, "but you can email any technical questions, and I'll try to respond when I can." His expression hardened momentarily before he forced another smile. "Of course. Good luck with your presentation." As we walked away, I felt Jessica's gaze burning into my back, but refused to turn around. That chapter of my professional life was closing, and I needed to focus on the future, not the past. Dinner with Jack and the investors was a revelation. Unlike the stifling atmosphere at Vertex, where technical discussions were constantly interrupted by political considerations, the conversation flowed freely between deeply technical topics and broad strategic visions. The investors, 3 venture capitalists with strong technical backgrounds and a representative from Nexus's board, asked insightful questions about the Carter-Chen model and its potential applications beyond customer service. "The core innovation," I explained over the main course, "isn't just in how the algorithm processes language, but in how it recognizes intent patterns across seemingly unrelated queries. Traditional NLP systems treat each interaction as isolated, but our model builds a contextual web that enables more intuitive responses." "And the practical applications?" one of the VCs asked. "Beyond customer service, the most promising areas are healthcare communication, educational support systems, and regulatory compliance," I replied. "Anywhere complex information needs to be made accessible and actionable for non-specialists." Jack leaned forward, clearly engaged. "What about scalability? Enterprise implementations often struggle when deployed globally across multiple languages and cultural contexts." It was exactly the question I'd hoped for. That's actually where our approach shows its greatest advantage, because the model focuses on intent patterns rather than specific linguistic structures. It adapts more efficiently to new languages. We've seen only a 12% performance decrease when transitioning from English to languages with entirely different grammatical structures, compared to the 30–40% typically observed in traditional systems. The conversation continued late into the evening, ranging from technical specifics to market positioning. By the time we concluded, it was clear that the interest from Nexus was serious and substantial. As we rode the elevator back to our respective floors, Eleanor gave me an approving nod. "You were brilliant tonight. No hedging, no downplaying, just clear expertise confidently presented." "It felt different," I admitted, "like I could finally breathe." "That's what happens when you stop hiding your light," she replied simply. Back in the presidential suite, I reviewed my presentation one final time before preparing for bed. Tomorrow would be the culmination of years of work, not just the technical development of the algorithm, but my personal journey toward claiming my own expertise without apology. As I was about to turn off my phone for the night, a text message arrived from Nate. Sentinel crashed completely this afternoon. Emergency meetings all evening. Bradley and Jessica flew to Aspen this morning. Rumor is they're there to bring you back at any cost. Watch your back. So that explained their sudden appearance at Alpine Ridge. It wasn't coincidence. It was desperation. Sentinel's complete failure would put the entire Meridian contract at risk, potentially costing Vertex millions in revenue. I texted back a quick thanks to Nate, then turned off my phone. Whatever crisis was unfolding at Vertex, it would have, to wait until after my presentation. For once, my priorities came first. Morning arrived with perfect mountain clarity, brilliant sunshine illuminating snow-capped peaks against a flawless blue sky. I dressed with deliberate care in my new burgundy suit, applied subtle makeup, and styled my hair in a sleek, professional manner. The woman who looked back from the mirror exuded confidence and expertise, someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. Eleanor met me for breakfast in the suite, reviewing last-minute details over coffee and pastries. The technical team checked everything again this morning. Systems are ready, and the demonstration environment is isolated from the resort's main network, so there's no risk of interference. I nodded, grateful for her thoroughness. And the attendee list? Full house, she confirmed. Plus a few last-minute additions. Jack arranged for several Meridian Global executives to attend, including their CTO. That was unexpected. Meridian's executives are here? Did Jack tell them about my connection to Sentinel? Not explicitly, Eleanor replied. But he mentioned that your presentation would showcase technology relevant to their current challenges. They made the connection themselves and requested to attend. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more nerve-wracking, presenting the full capabilities of my algorithm to the very executives whose systems were failing because of my watered-down implementation created both opportunity and risk. This changes things, I said slowly. If Meridian's executives are present, Bradley will be even more desperate to control the narrative. Eleanor's expression turned serious. You think he might try to disrupt your presentation? Not overtly, I replied. But he'll certainly attempt to minimize the connection between me and Sentinel's architecture, or suggest that any improvements I'm demonstrating were already in development at Vertex. Then we'll need to be absolutely clear about the provenance of the technology, Eleanor decided. I'll make some adjustments to my introduction. We arrived at the presentation room 30 minutes early to complete final preparations. The space had been arranged exactly as requested, tiered seating facing a central demonstration area, with high-resolution displays positioned for optimal visibility. The technical team ran through a final systems check, confirming that everything was functioning perfectly. As attendees began filtering in, I noticed Jack escorting a group of executives to the front row. From their badges, I recognized Meridian Global's distinctive logo. The company's CTO, a sharp-featured woman whose reputation for technical excellence was well known in the industry, surveyed the room with keen interest. In the middle rows, Bradley and Jessica took seats, their expressions a study in controlled tension. Bradley caught my eye briefly, giving a tight nod that might have been encouragement or warning. I couldn't tell which. At precisely 10 a.m., Eleanor stepped to the podium to begin her introduction. Good morning, and welcome to what I believe will be one of the most significant technical demonstrations of this summit. Before we begin, I want to be absolutely clear about what you're about to see and its origins. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room with the commanding presence that had intimidated and inspired generations of students. The Carter Chen model was initially developed 5 years ago as part of Alexandra Chen's doctoral work under my supervision at the Carter Institute for Advanced Computing. The algorithm represented a fundamental breakthrough in natural language processing, particularly in intent recognition across linguistic contexts. Another pause, and I saw Bradley shift uncomfortably in his seat. While elements of this technology have been implemented in commercial applications, today marks the first public demonstration of its full capabilities. Capabilities that Dr. Chen has continued to refine and expand since her initial research. With that clear establishment of the technology's origins, Eleanor introduced me to enthusiastic applause. As I took her place at the podium, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was my moment, not to prove myself to others, but to finally claim the expertise I had spent years downplaying. "Thank you, Dr. Carter, and thank you all for being here today," I began. "What you're about to see is not just an incremental improvement in natural language processing, but a fundamental reimagining of how AI systems can understand human intent." For the next 45 minutes, I led the audience through a comprehensive demonstration of the Carter-Chen model's capabilities, using real-world examples drawn from Meridian's public customer service interactions. I showed how the system could identify emotional nuance, recognize implicit needs behind explicit requests, and generate responses that addressed both the stated and unstated aspects of a query. When I demonstrated the system's ability to seamlessly transition between multiple languages while maintaining context, a feature that had been deliberately omitted from Sentinel's implementation at Vertex, I noticed Meridian's CTO leaning forward with intense interest, whispering to her colleagues. The technical questions that followed were incisive and thoughtful, allowing me to highlight aspects of the algorithm that showcased its adaptability and scalability. Throughout, I maintained a confident, authoritative presence, answering without hesitation or equivocation. Finally, Jack Morrison rose with the last question. "Alex, given what we've seen today, I have to ask, why hasn't this full capability been implemented in existing commercial applications? The performance metrics you've demonstrated far exceed anything currently on the market." It was the opening. I needed to address the Vertex situation directly, but professionally. "That's an excellent question," I acknowledged. "The full implementation requires a deep understanding of the underlying mathematical principles and a commitment to maintaining architectural integrity. When developing commercial applications, there's often pressure to simplify for immediate deployment, sometimes at the cost of long-term performance." My gaze briefly met Bradley's. Additionally, many organizations don't fully utilize the capabilities of their technical talent, particularly when that talent doesn't align with preconceived notions of what leadership looks like. The message was clear but not accusatory. I was stating facts, not settling scores. What we've demonstrated today represents what's possible when technical excellence is prioritized over expediency and when innovation is valued over convention. Thank you. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As people rose from their seats, Meridian's CTO made a direct line toward me, her expression intense. "Ms. Chen, that was remarkable," she said without preamble. "Particularly the multilingual context preservation. We've been trying to achieve similar functionality with our current system for over a year." "Thank you," I replied, acutely aware of Bradley hovering nearby, clearly trying to insert himself into the conversation. "I understand you were involved with Sentinel's initial development at Vertex," she continued, glancing briefly toward Bradley but pointedly not including him in the conversation. "I led the quantum team for 5 years," I confirmed, "though the implementation at Vertex represents a simplified version of what you saw today." Her eyebrows rose. Simplified by choice or by constraint? It was a perceptive question that cut to the heart of the situation. "A combination of both," I replied honestly. "When developing commercial applications, compromises are sometimes necessary to meet deployment timelines." Bradley finally managed to edge his way into our conversation. "Ms. Chen was a valuable contributor to Sentinel's early development," he interjected smoothly. "Though, of course, the system has evolved significantly under our current leadership team." Meridian's CTO gave him a cool look. "Evolved into non-functionality, from what I understand." Our customer satisfaction metrics have dropped 30% in the 3 weeks since the system began experiencing issues. Bradley flushed. As I explained in yesterday's call, we're implementing architectural improvements that will resolve those issues. Under Ms. Chen's guidance, according to your technical team, she noted dryly, before turning back to me. I'd be very interested in discussing how the full capabilities you demonstrated today could be implemented in our customer service systems. Perhaps we could meet privately before the summit concludes. It was a clear expression of interest, not in Vertex's struggling implementation, but in what I could offer directly. Before I could respond, Jack Morrison appeared at my side. Alex, we'll be rather busy with Nexus meetings for the remainder of the summit, he said smoothly. But I'm sure we could arrange something afterward, particularly if Meridian is open to exploring new partnerships. The implication was clear. Jack was positioning Nexus as Meridian's potential new technology provider, with me as the key asset. Bradley's expression shifted from anxiety to alarm as he realized the conversation had moved beyond Sentinel's recovery to its potential replacement. Vertex has an exclusive contract with Meridian for customer service AI implementation, objected. A contract with significant performance requirements that haven't been met for 3 weeks, Meridian's CTO replied pointedly. Our legal team is reviewing our options. The conversation was interrupted by the announcement of the next presentation, requiring everyone to move toward their seats. As the crowd dispersed, Bradley caught my arm. We need to talk, he said, urgently. Now. I gently but firmly removed his hand. I have a follow-up session with Nexus executives in 5 minutes. Whatever you need to discuss can be handled through proper channels. His expression hardened. This isn't a game, Alex. Vertex could lose its largest client because you're withholding critical information about Sentinel's architecture. I've provided detailed documentation and guidance, I replied calmly. The fact that Jessica hasn't been able to implement it effectively isn't my responsibility. You deliberately built a system that only you could fully understand, he accused, his voice low but intense. No, I corrected him. I built an elegant, well-documented system that required actual technical expertise to maintain. Expertise that you dismissed when you removed me from my own team. Before he could respond, Eleanor appeared at my side. Alex, Jack is waiting with the Nexus team. We should go. As we walked away, I could feel Bradley's gaze burning into my back. This confrontation wasn't over. It was only beginning. The meeting with Nexus executives took place in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the mountain panorama. Jack Morrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by his chief technology officer and head of strategic partnerships. Eleanor took a seat beside me, her presence both supportive and strategic. That was quite an impressive demonstration, Alex. Jack began without preamble. Particularly your handling of the multilingual context preservation. I don't think I've seen real-time translation maintain emotional nuance that effectively before. Thank you, I replied, noting how different it felt to accept praise straightforwardly instead of deflecting or minimizing as I would have at Vertex. That particular feature required rethinking how the algorithm processes cultural context alongside linguistic patterns. Nexus's CTO leaned forward, eyes bright with interest. The performance metrics you displayed, are those consistent across different datasets or optimized for the demonstration? They're actually averaged across 5 distinct datasets, I explained. The Meridian examples were chosen for their relevance to the audience, but we've tested the model on everything from technical support transcripts to medical consultation records. The variance is typically within 3 percentage points, with slightly better performance on technical content due to the precision of terminology. The conversation flowed into the technical depths of the algorithm, with Nexus's team asking increasingly specific questions about implementation requirements, scalability considerations, and integration capabilities. Unlike my experiences at Vertex, where technical discussions were often cut short for business considerations, these executives seemed genuinely eager to understand the underlying architecture. After nearly an hour of substantive discussion, Jack shifted the conversation toward more practical matters. Let's discuss how we might work together. Eleanor mentioned you're considering your options after departing Vertex. That's correct, I confirmed. I'm evaluating several possibilities, including independent consulting. Jack nodded thoughtfully. We'd like to propose something more substantial. Nexus is establishing a dedicated natural language processing division focused on enterprise applications. We're looking for someone to build and lead that team, someone with both technical brilliance and a vision for how this technology can transform business operations. The offer hung in the air, its implications clear. This wasn't just a job. It was an opportunity to build something significant with proper support and recognition. The position would come with considerable autonomy, Jack continued, including authority to select your team members and determine technical direction. Compensation would include equity stake in addition to a competitive salary package. It was exactly the kind of role I might have dreamed about, but had never actively pursued, believing I needed to prove myself through years of incremental advancement. I'm definitely interested, I replied carefully. Though I should mention that I'm currently providing consulting services to Vertex during their transition. I have certain obligations to fulfill there. Jack waved a dismissive hand. We understand professional commitments. Take the time you need to properly conclude your Vertex responsibilities. We're interested in building something lasting, not in creating unnecessary conflicts. His response reinforced my growing impression of Nexus as an organization that valued both innovation and integrity, a refreshing contrast to the political environment I'd navigated at Vertex. There's one more thing to consider, Eleanor interjected. The situation with Meridian Global. Their interest in Alex's presentation was obvious, and given Vertex's current difficulties, they may be exploring alternative technology partners. Jack's expression turned thoughtful. An excellent point. If Meridian is already familiar with an earlier version of your technology, they might be particularly receptive to an enhanced implementation through Nexus. That could represent a significant opportunity for both parties. The strategic implications were clear. If Meridian terminated their contract with Vertex and partnered with Nexus instead, it would not only provide an immediate high-profile client for the new NLP division, but also establish a powerful market position for the full implementation of my algorithm. I'd be comfortable with that approach, I said, as long as we're careful to respect intellectual property boundaries. The core algorithm is mine, but the specific Sentinel implementation includes proprietary elements developed at Vertex. Jack nodded approvingly. Precisely the kind of ethical consideration we value. We have no interest in replicating Sentinel. We want to build something far more advanced based on your original research. As the meeting concluded, Jack suggested, we reconvene the following day to discuss specific terms. In the meantime, he added, I've arranged for you to join a private dinner tonight with several key industry figures, including Meridian's CTO. No pressure or expectations, just an opportunity for informal conversations. Walking back to the presidential suite with Eleanor, I felt a sense of validation that transcended mere professional satisfaction. For years, I had deliberately constrained my ambitions, convinced that success earned through connections wouldn't be meaningful. Now I was discovering that true recognition came not from hiding my capabilities, but from fully embracing and demonstrating them. You're unusually quiet, Eleanor observed as we entered the suite. Having second thoughts? The opposite, I replied, sinking into one of the plush armchairs overlooking the mountain vista. I'm wondering why I spent so long limiting myself. the position Jack described. It's everything I secretly wanted but wouldn't let myself pursue. Eleanor smiled, a mixture of satisfaction and vindication in her expression. Some lessons can only be learned through experience. The important thing is that you've recognized it now. Our conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Eleanor crossed the room to answer it, returning moments later with a troubled expression. "It's the resort manager," she said quietly. "There's been an incident involving Bradley Wilson. He's demanding to see you immediately." My sense of accomplishment evaporated, replaced by a familiar tension. What kind of incident? "Apparently, he attempted to access the technical setup for your demonstration," Eleanor explained. "The security team stopped him, but he became quite confrontational. He's claiming he needs to verify certain intellectual property concerns on behalf of Vertex." The implications were both alarming and infuriating. Bradley wasn't just desperate. He was potentially crossing ethical and legal boundaries. "I should handle this," I said, rising from my chair. "Where is he now?" "The manager has him in the administrative offices," Eleanor replied. "I'll come with you." "No," I decided after a moment's consideration. "I think I need to address this directly, without intermediaries. It's time to establish some clear boundaries." Eleanor looked skeptical but nodded. "If you're certain, but remember, you don't owe him anything, and you don't need to justify your choices." The resort's administrative offices were located in a discreet wing away from guest areas. The manager, a distinguished man in his 50s with a calm, unflappable demeanor, greeted me at the entrance. "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. I apologize for the disruption to your day." "No apology necessary," I assured him. "I understand there was an issue with Mr. Wilson?" "Yes," he confirmed, his professional tone not quite masking his disapproval. "He was found attempting to enter the secured technical area where your demonstration equipment is stored. When confronted by security, he claimed he needed to verify certain technical details related to your presentation. When denied access, he became rather insistent." "I see. Where is he now?" "In our conference room," the manager replied. "Security is stationed outside, though he's calmed down considerably since we contacted you." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I'd like to speak with him alone." "Are you certain?" The manager looked concerned. His behavior was quite aggressive. "I'm certain," I replied with more confidence than I felt. "But perhaps security could remain nearby just in case." The manager nodded and led me to a small but elegant conference room. "That makes him dangerous. We should alert Jack and the resort security to keep an eye on him." "You think he might try something else?" I asked, surprised despite everything. Eleanor shrugged. "People with fragile egos often make irrational choices when their self-image is threatened. Better to be cautious." She was right, of course. I sent a brief message to Jack, outlining the situation without embellishment. His response was immediate. "Security already notified me. Additional measures in place. Enjoy dinner tonight. I'll ensure our unwanted friend keeps his distance." The private dinner Jack had arranged took place in an intimate dining room with spectacular mountain views. The guest list was small but significant. Meridian's CTO and head of digital transformation, two venture capitalists known for funding innovative AI startups, Nexus's head of strategic partnerships, and of course, Jack Morrison himself. The setting was deliberately casual, a strategy I recognized from Eleanor's approach to important negotiations. By removing the formality of a business dinner, she created an environment where genuine connections could form and conversations could flow naturally between professional and personal topics. I arrived wearing a midnight blue dress that struck the perfect balance between sophistication and approachability. Another calculated choice, guided by Eleanor's advice to present myself authentically rather than adopting the deliberately understated appearance I'd maintained at Vertex. "Alex, perfect timing," Jack greeted me warmly. "We were just discussing the future of enterprise AI integration. Your demonstration this morning has sparked quite the debate about implementation approaches." Meridian's CTO, Catherine Walsh, gestured to the empty seat beside her. "Join us. I have about 1,000 questions about your intent recognition module." The conversation flowed easily, moving from technical specifics to broader industry trends. I found myself speaking with a confidence that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago, offering insights and opinions without the constant self-editing that had characterized my professional interactions at Vertex. As the main course was served, Catherine turned the conversation toward more specific possibilities. "Hypothetically," she began, "if Meridian were to pursue a new implementation of natural language processing technology for our customer service operations, what timeline would you envision for development and deployment?" The question wasn't hypothetical, and everyone at the table knew it. This was a subtle but clear exploration of what working with Nexus, and specifically with me, might look like. "With a dedicated team and proper resources," I replied thoughtfully, "I would estimate 4 months for a comprehensive implementation, with progressive functionality deployments beginning after the first 6 weeks. Catherine's eyebrows rose, appreciatively. "That's significantly faster than our current provider estimated for their system recovery," Jack interjected smoothly. "Nexus prioritizes efficient implementation without sacrificing quality. Alex's approach to modular development allows for incremental deployment while maintaining architectural integrity." The conversation continued in this vein, with Catherine and her colleague asking increasingly specific questions about technical architecture, integration requirements, and performance expectations. By the time dessert was served, it was clear that Meridian was seriously considering Nexus as an alternative to Vertex. As the dinner concluded, Catherine drew me aside. "I've been authorized to request a formal proposal," she said, without preamble. "Specifically for a complete replacement of our current customer service AI system, with you as the lead architect." The directness of her approach was refreshing after months of navigating Vertex's political undercurrents. "I understand Vertex still has an active contract with Meridian," I noted cautiously. Catherine's expression turned pragmatic. "A contract with specific performance requirements that haven't been met for nearly a month now. Our legal team has confirmed we have grounds for termination based on sustained system failures." She paused, studying my reaction. "I understand your concern about conflict of interest, but Meridian's priority has to be functional technology. Sentiment simply doesn't drive business decisions at our level." "I appreciate your candor," I replied. "I'll discuss the proposal with Jack and get back to you promptly." As I turned to leave, Catherine added one more thing. "For what it's worth, our technical team has always known that Sentinel's success was primarily attributable to your architecture. Bradley Wilson's presentations never quite masked that fact, despite his attempts to take credit." Her words struck a chord, validation that my work had been recognized by those who truly understood it, even when my own company failed to properly acknowledge my contributions. When I rejoined Jack and Eleanor, they were deep in conversation with the venture capitalists, discussing potential applications of the Carter-Chen model beyond customer service. I caught Eleanor's eye, and she smoothly extracted herself from the conversation to join me. "Catherine just requested a formal proposal for a complete system replacement," I informed her quietly. "With me as lead architect through Nexus." Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, but her expression remained composed. "That's moving faster than even I anticipated. Jack needs to know immediately." Together, we approached Jack and discreetly updated him on Meridian's request. His reaction was measured but clearly pleased. "Outstanding," he murmured, "though we should proceed carefully. Bradley Wilson struck me as the type who might resort to legal challenges if he feels cornered. Agreed, Eleanor replied. We should have legal review any proposal before submission, with particular attention to intellectual property considerations. Jack nodded. I'll have our team begin drafting tonight. Alex, would you be available in the morning to provide technical input? Of course, I agreed, still processing the rapid evolution of events. Just 3 weeks ago, I had been silently enduring Bradley's undermining at Vertex. Now I was potentially on the verge of building a completely new implementation for their largest client. As we left the dining room, I noticed a hotel staff member approaching with an urgent expression. Ms. Chen, there's a situation that requires your attention. One of the guests is creating a disturbance in the main lobby, demanding to speak with you. Jack frowned. Bradley Wilson? The staff member shook his head. No, sir. A woman named Jessica Miller. She appears quite agitated. Jessica? That was unexpected. I'll handle this, I told Jack and Eleanor. It might be related to Sentinel's technical issues. The main lobby was largely empty at this late hour, with only a few guests lingering near the massive stone fireplace. Jessica stood near the reception desk, her professional demeanor noticeably frayed. When she spotted me, she hurried over, her expression a mixture of anger and desperation. How could you do this? She demanded without preamble. You're deliberately sabotaging Sentinel to punish Bradley, aren't you? I blinked, genuinely confused. What are you talking about? The system crashed completely this afternoon, she explained, her voice tight with accusation. Right after you supposedly fixed the core module issues. And now Meridian is openly discussing termination of our contract. This can't be coincidence. The implication was so absurd that it took me a moment to formulate a response. Jessica, I provided exactly the guidance I promised. If the system crashed again, it's because someone implemented those changes incorrectly or made additional modifications that created new conflicts. No one touched anything beyond your specific instructions, she insisted. We followed your documentation to the letter. A troubling thought occurred to me. Who actually implemented the changes? You or someone else on the team? Jessica hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion. Bradley brought in an external consultant. He said we needed someone with more enterprise-level experience. An external consultant who had no prior knowledge of Sentinel's architecture? I asked incredulously. Who made changes to a system they didn't build or understand? Her silence was answer enough. Jessica, I said more gently, recognizing that she too was caught in a situation not entirely of her making. Sentinel's architecture was deliberately designed with certain internal dependencies that aren't obvious without understanding the underlying intent patterns. An external consultant wouldn't recognize those connections, especially if they were focusing on symptomatic fixes rather than architectural integrity. The anger in her expression began to fade, replaced by dawning comprehension. That's why the documentation wasn't sufficient. It explained what to do, but not why certain components were structured that way. Exactly, I confirmed. The why is embedded in the Carter-Chen model that formed Sentinel's theoretical foundation, research that wasn't fully documented in the Vertex materials because I deliberately simplified the implementation. Jessica looked stricken. So when Bradley brought in someone to fix your code, they likely broke the very connections that made the system function, I completed her thought. Not out of malice or incompetence, but because they couldn't see the underlying pattern. She sank into a nearby chair, the fight gone out of her. We're done, aren't we? Meridian's going to terminate the contract. I sat beside her, feeling an unexpected sympathy. Despite her role in my removal from the quantum team, Jessica was essentially a pawn in Bradley's power plays. Someone who had made the reasonable but ultimately misguided choice to align herself with the person who appeared to hold the most authority. That's a business decision that's out of both our hands, I replied honestly. But regardless of what happens with Meridian, your career isn't defined by this situation. You're talented, Jessica. Your implementation of the response generation module showed genuine insight. She looked up, surprised by the compliment. You really think so? I do. Your approach to contextual response variation was elegant, more sophisticated than what I had originally designed. You have good instincts when you trust them, instead of trying to conform to someone else's expectations. Jessica was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I made a mistake, she admitted finally. When Bradley offered me the lead position on your team, I should have questioned why he was removing the person who built the system. But it seemed like such an opportunity, and he made it sound like you were holding the team back with outdated approaches. The familiar pattern, a woman undermined by a man in authority, and another woman unwittingly used as the instrument of that undermining, was so painfully recognizable that I couldn't maintain any anger toward her. We all make choices based on the information available to us, I said. Sometimes the hardest part is recognizing when to change course. She nodded slowly. What happens now? With Sentinel? With Vertex? With you? I'm moving forward with new opportunities, I told her honestly. As for Sentinel and Vertex, that depends on decisions that will be made in boardrooms far above our pay grade. But whatever happens, don't let Bradley convince you that this failure is your responsibility. The decisions that led here were made long before you joined the team. As I stood to leave, Jessica looked up with an expression that had shifted from accusation to something closer to respect. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about how things happened. You deserved better. We all did, I replied simply. When I returned to the presidential suite, Eleanor was waiting with a glass of wine and a knowing expression. Crisis averted? More like perspective gained, I replied, accepting the offered glass gratefully. Jessica believed I had deliberately sabotaged Sentinel after providing consultation. Turns out Bradley brought in an external consultant who made changes without understanding the system architecture. Eleanor shook her head, unsurprised. Typical. When faced with a problem he created by undermining female expertise, he brought in presumably male outside consultation rather than acknowledging his mistake. She raised her glass in a sardonic toast. Through the glass partition, I could see Bradley seated at the table, his normally impeccable appearance noticeably disheveled. His tie was loosened, his hair mussed as though he'd been repeatedly running his hands through it. When I entered, he looked up with an expression that cycled rapidly from surprise to relief to something harder to define. Perhaps shame mingled with desperation. "Alex," he said, rising from his chair, "thank you for coming." "Sit down, Bradley," I replied, my voice calm but firm. I took a seat across from him, maintaining eye contact. "I understand you tried to access my demonstration equipment without authorization." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It wasn't like that. I needed to verify some technical details relevant to Vertex's intellectual property interests. By breaking into a secured area?" I raised a skeptical eyebrow. "That's not how legitimate intellectual property concerns are addressed." Bradley ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "You don't understand the pressure we're under. Meridian is threatening to terminate their contract, a contract worth 40% of our annual revenue. The board is demanding answers, and everyone is looking at me to fix a problem I don't fully understand." For the first time, I saw Bradley not as the confident, calculating executive who had undermined me for months, but as what he truly was, a man out of his depth, desperately trying to maintain control of a situation that had spiraled beyond his capabilities. "And you thought accessing my presentation equipment would help how exactly?" I asked. He hesitated, clearly weighing how honest to be. "I thought if I could see exactly what you were demonstrating, the full implementation you mentioned, I might better understand what Sentinel is missing." what Jessica hasn't been able to replicate despite following your documentation. So, you admit that Jessica doesn't understand the system architecture? I noted, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. Bradley's expression hardened momentarily before collapsing into resignation. No one understands it like you do. That's becoming painfully clear. He leaned forward, his voice taking on an almost pleading quality. Alex, Vertex needs you. I know I made a terrible mistake removing you from the quantum team. The board knows it too. We're prepared to offer you full control of AI development, reporting directly to the CEO, with a compensation package that would make Nexus's offer look conservative by comparison. So he knew about Nexus's interest. That wasn't surprising. The tech world was small, and Jack hadn't been subtle about his intentions during our confrontation with Meridian's CTO. It's not about the money, Bradley, I said, surprising myself with how true the statement felt. It's about respect, recognition, and the freedom to innovate without constant undermining. All of which you'll have, he promised quickly. Complete autonomy, proper credit for your contributions, whatever resources you need. And Jessica? I asked pointedly. Bradley hesitated only briefly. Reassigned to whatever role you deem appropriate, or let go if that's your preference. The casual cruelty of his willingness to discard Jessica, just as he had discarded me when it suited him, only reinforced my determination to move forward rather than backward. That won't be necessary, I replied. Jessica is talented, just inexperienced and perhaps misguided in her professional approach. The problem was never her capabilities. It was your leadership. The words landed like physical blows. Bradley flinched, then seemed to deflate further. What do you want, Alex? He asked finally. Name your terms. I considered his question carefully before responding. I'll continue providing remote consulting to stabilize Sentinel, as outlined in our existing agreement. I'll even extend that arrangement through the transition to whatever new solution Vertex implements, whether that's a rebuilt version of Sentinel or something entirely different. But you won't come back, he concluded, reading the unspoken decision in my tone. No, I confirmed. That chapter is closed. Bradley was silent for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he looked up again, his expression had shifted from desperate to calculating. And if Meridian terminates their contract with Vertex? If they pursue a new implementation through Nexus, with you at the helm? That would be Meridian's business decision, I replied carefully. Just as removing me from my team was yours. His jaw tightened. You know that would potentially destroy Vertex. Without the Meridian contract, we'd likely face layoffs, possibly even bankruptcy. The emotional manipulation was so transparent, it was almost laughable. Bradley, you removed the lead architect from a mission-critical system, reassigned key, team members who understood the implementation, and ignored documented processes in favor of quick, incompatible changes. If Vertex fails as a result of those decisions, that responsibility lies with leadership, not with me. He stared at me, seeming to truly see me for the first time, not as the unassuming developer he had underestimated, but as someone who understood both the technical and business implications of his actions with perfect clarity. I won't let you destroy what I've built, he said finally, his voice low but intense. I have no interest in destroying anything, I replied evenly. My only interest is in building something meaningful, with people who value what I bring to the table. Now, if you're finished making vague threats, I have dinner preparations to attend to. I stood, signaling that our conversation was over. Bradley remained seated, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, Alex. For me, it is, I replied simply, and walked out without looking back. When I returned to the presidential suite, Eleanor was waiting with barely contained curiosity. Well, what happened? I recounted the conversation as accurately as possible. including Bradley's desperate offer and his parting words. "He's backed into a corner," Eleanor observed when I finished. "Yes," I replied after a moment's reflection. "The system Meridian needs isn't Sentinel. It's what Sentinel could have been if it had been allowed to reach its full potential. I'm ready to build that." Jack nodded, satisfied with my response. "Excellent. In that case, I'd like to schedule a formal presentation to Meridian's executive team tomorrow afternoon. Nothing elaborate, just a focused overview of our approach and timeline, with emphasis on the technical advancements your full algorithm enables." The accelerated timeline was ambitious but manageable. "I'll need a few hours to prepare the technical demonstration components," I noted, already mentally cataloging what would be required. "Our technical team is at your disposal," Jack assured me. "Whatever resources you need, just ask." As Jack gathered his materials to leave, he paused with a thoughtful expression. "One more thing to consider. If Meridian formally engages Nexus with you as lead architect, there's a high probability that Bradley Wilson will pursue legal challenges, regardless of merit. Are you prepared for that possibility?" The question was direct but necessary. "I've maintained clear documentation of my contributions at Vertex, as well as the circumstances of my removal from the quantum team," I replied. "More importantly, the Carter-Chen model predates my employment at Vertex and was developed under proper academic protocols with Eleanor. The simplified version implemented in Sentinel represents only a fraction of the algorithm's capabilities." Jack seemed satisfied with my answer. "Good. Our legal team will prepare accordingly. In the meantime, try not to engage directly with Bradley or other Vertex representatives without counsel present." After he left, I spent a focused hour expanding the technical specifications for the Meridian proposal, detailing how the full implementation would address their specific needs while dramatically exceeding Sentinel's capabilities. The work was energizing, a chance to finally realize the vision I had been forced to compromise at Vertex. My concentration was interrupted by a text from Eleanor. "Bradley Wilson causing scene in main restaurant. Security involved. Might want to avoid public areas for now." I sighed, not entirely surprised. Bradley's increasingly erratic behavior suggested a man watching his carefully constructed professional image crumble in real time. Still, I had work to focus on, and his drama was no longer my concern. A knock on my door announced room service with the lunch I'd ordered earlier. As the server arranged the meal on the dining table, he mentioned casually, "The gentleman from Vertex has been asking about your whereabouts, Ms. Chen. Security has advised him to respect your privacy, but I thought you should know." "Thank you," I replied, making a mental note to add a generous tip for the helpful information. "I appreciate the heads up." After lunch, I ventured down to the technical suite where my presentation equipment was stored, escorted by a member of the resort's security team at Eleanor's insistence. The space had been secured after Bradley's attempted intrusion, with access restricted to authorized personnel only. Working with Nexus's technical team, I spent the afternoon building a demonstration environment that would showcase how the full Carter-Chen model could transform Meridian's customer service operations. Unlike the simplified version implemented in Sentinel, this would highlight the algorithm's advanced contextual understanding and predictive capabilities, features I had deliberately constrained at Vertex to prove I could build success from fundamental principles rather than relying on my breakthrough research. The irony wasn't lost on me. By limiting what I showed the world, I had inadvertently made it easier for others to dismiss or diminish my contributions. Now, by fully embracing and demonstrating my capabilities, I was creating opportunities that my previous approach had blocked. As evening approached, I received a message from Jack inviting me to join a strategy dinner with Nexus's executive team. Casual setting, focused discussion on integration of your work into broader Nexus ecosystem. 7 p.m. in private dining room. I returned to the presidential suite to freshen up before dinner, finding Eleanor already there reviewing documents at the living room desk. "Productive day?" she asked, glancing up from her work. Very, I confirmed. The demonstration for Meridian is taking shape nicely. How about you? I heard Bradley caused another scene. Eleanor shook her head, a mixture of disapproval and amusement in her expression. He attempted to join a breakfast meeting between Jack and Catherine Walsh. When politely informed that it was a private discussion, he became rather insistent about Vertex's contractual rights with Meridian. Security eventually escorted him back to his room. He's unraveling, I observed, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy despite everything. His entire professional identity is tied to Vertex's success with Meridian. A precarious foundation he built himself, Eleanor pointed out pragmatically. Though I understand your empathy, it's never pleasant watching someone self-destruct, even when they've earned the consequences of their actions. She was right, as usual. Bradley had created this situation through his own choices, undermining me, taking credit for my work, and ultimately removing me from the team I had built. Whatever happened now was the natural outcome of those decisions. Jack mentioned legal preparations in case Bradley pursues challenges to my work with Nexus, I said, changing the subject to more practical concerns. Do you think that's likely? Eleanor considered the question thoughtfully. Almost certainly, though any claims would be tenuous at best. The Carter-Chen model is well documented as our academic work, predating your employment at Vertex. The simplified implementation in Sentinel might involve some proprietary elements, but nothing that would prevent you from developing new applications based on your original research. Her assessment aligned with my own analysis, providing additional reassurance as I prepared for the evening's strategy dinner. The private dining room where Nexus's executive team gathered featured a spectacular view of the mountains bathed in the golden light of sunset. Jack introduced me to several key figures I hadn't yet met: the chief financial officer, the head of global operations, and 2 board members with technical backgrounds. Unlike similar dinners at Vertex, where technical discussions were often simplified or sidelined for business concerns, the conversation flowed seamlessly between technical depth and strategic considerations. Most refreshingly, no one attempted to explain my own area of expertise to me or question whether my architectural approach was too complicated for practical implementation, criticisms I had frequently encountered from Bradley and his allies. As the main course was served, Jack steered the conversation toward my potential role at Nexus. Alex has agreed in principle to lead our new natural language processing division, he informed the group. Her vision aligns perfectly with our strategic direction toward more sophisticated AI integration across enterprise applications. Particularly timely given recent market developments, the CFO noted with a knowing look. Word about Meridian's termination of their Vertex contract is already circulating in financial circles. Their stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. The news wasn't surprising given the critical importance of the Meridian contract to Vertex's revenue, but the speed with which the market had reacted indicated that investors had already been concerned about the company's stability. Is there any possibility of legal complications regarding your transition? One of the board members asked me directly. Non-compete clauses or intellectual property claims? My employment agreement with Vertex contained standard non-compete language, I explained, but it was specifically limited to directly competing products within 6 months of departure. Since I was terminated rather than resigning, there's legal precedent suggesting those restrictions may be unenforceable. More importantly, the core algorithm underlying my work predates my employment at Vertex and was developed as academic research with proper documentation. The board member nodded, satisfied with my response. Excellent. We'll ensure legal provides comprehensive protection, of course, but it sounds like you've already considered the key vulnerabilities. The conversation shifted to implementation, timelines, and resource allocation for the new division, with each executive offering thoughtful input on integration with existing Nexus products and services. Throughout the discussion, My expertise was not just acknowledged but actively sought, a stark contrast to how my input had often been minimized or dismissed at Vertex. As coffee and dessert were served, Jack raised a related but unexpected topic. Given recent developments, we should consider whether there are other valuable team members at Vertex who might be interested in joining Nexus, particularly those who worked directly with Alex on Sentinel. The suggestion sparked immediate strategic discussion among the executives. Recruiting key talent from a competitor facing financial challenges was standard practice in the industry, but the specific circumstances, coming immediately after Meridian's contract termination, required careful handling. I know several members of the quantum team who would bring significant value, I confirmed when asked directly, particularly Nate Douglas, who was instrumental in implementing the response generation module and has exceptional insight into the system architecture. By the time dinner concluded, a preliminary recruiting strategy had been outlined, focused on approaching key technical talent with the right combination of expertise and cultural fit. Jack asked me to provide a short list of potential candidates, emphasizing quality over quantity. "We're not looking to gut Vertex's technical team," he explained, "just to bring over the most exceptional talent who might otherwise be lost in the inevitable restructuring they'll face." Walking back to the presidential suite after dinner, I reflected on how dramatically my professional situation had transformed in just 3 weeks. From being undermined and ultimately removed from my own team, I was now positioned to build something new and significant, with proper support and recognition. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Thomas Green, CEO of Vertex. We need to talk urgently about the Meridian situation. Please call at your convenience." The message wasn't entirely unexpected given the day's developments, but the direct outreach from Vertex's CEO, rather than through Bradley, suggested how serious the situation had become. After a moment's consideration, I decided to respond, in writing, rather than call immediately. "Mr. Green, I'm currently engaged with other commitments at the Alpine Ridge Summit. I remain available for technical consultation regarding Sentinel per our existing agreement, but any broader discussions should involve legal counsel given the evolving circumstances." His response came quickly. "Understood. For what it's worth, Bradley Wilson has been placed on administrative leave pending review of his management decisions. I'd like to discuss potential paths forward that might benefit all parties involved." This development was surprising and potentially significant. Bradley's removal, even temporarily, suggested that Vertex's leadership was finally recognizing the extent of his mismanagement. Still, caution seemed prudent given the high stakes involved. "I appreciate the update," I replied carefully. "I'll be available for a call tomorrow afternoon after my current commitments conclude." Setting aside my phone, I entered the presidential suite to find Eleanor engaged in animated conversation with Jack Morrison, both looking up with expressions that suggested important news. "Perfect timing," Eleanor greeted me. Jack was just sharing some interesting intelligence from his financial sources. Jack nodded, his expression both serious and satisfied. "Vertex's board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Apparently, when Meridian formally notified them of contract termination, they included specific language citing the removal of key technical leadership, meaning you, as a primary factor in the system failures. The implications were significant, both for Vertex organizationally and for my professional vindication." "That explains Thomas Green's text," I noted, sharing the CEO's message. "Strategic damage control," Jack assessed immediately. "They're facing a catastrophic revenue loss and need to demonstrate decisive action to stabilize investor confidence. Placing Bradley on leave is the obvious first step." "What do you think Green wants to discuss?" I asked, genuinely curious about what approach Vertex might take to salvage the situation. Jack and Eleanor exchanged knowing glances before Eleanor spoke. Most likely, they'll propose some form of strategic partnership that would allow them to maintain partial involvement with Meridian through your work at Nexus. Perhaps a transitional arrangement where Vertex provides supporting services during implementation of the new system, which we would consider only if it presented clear advantages for Nexus and Meridian, Jack added firmly, not as a lifeline for Vertex. The analytical clarity with which they assessed the situation was refreshing after months of navigating Vertex's emotionally charged power dynamics. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would be approaching it from a position of strength rather than vulnerability, backed by people who recognized my value rather than those who sought to diminish it. Get some rest, Eleanor advised as Jack prepared to leave. Tomorrow will likely bring its own set of challenges and opportunities. She was right, of course. The confrontation with Bradley, the presentation to Meridian, the potential discussion with Vertex's CEO, each required clear thinking and strategic focus. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with one final message for the day, from Nate. Just heard news about Vertex stock plummet and Bradley's administrative leave. Whatever you're doing at that fancy mountain resort, it's working. Half the team is updating their resumes and checking flight prices to Seattle. Let me know when you're ready to rebuild the quantum team somewhere that actually values what we do. His message brought a smile to my face and a sense of possibility that extended beyond my own career trajectory. The team I had built, the people who had invested their talent and creativity in building Sentinel despite Bradley's interference, deserved better than to have their work dismantled by poor leadership decisions. Perhaps in this crisis lay the opportunity to not just rebuild my own career, but to create something better for all of us. Sleep came easily that night, my mind clear and focused on the future, rather than dwelling on past frustrations. Whatever happened tomorrow would be approached from a position of strength and authenticity. No more hiding my capabilities or diminishing my contributions to appear less threatening. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the mountain air invigorating, as I stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet reflection before the day's events unfolded. My phone already showed several notifications, messages from Nexus's technical team confirming the demonstration setup was complete, an update from Jack about the Meridian presentation schedule, and interestingly, a LinkedIn notification that Jessica Miller had viewed my profile. I wondered briefly what that might signify: professional curiosity, competitive analysis, or perhaps a reassessment of her own career choices in light of Vertex's unfolding crisis. Whatever her reasons, I hoped she was recognizing that aligning with power rather than principle was ultimately a precarious professional strategy. The day ahead would bring its own challenges and opportunities. The presentation to Meridian, the potential conversation with Vertex's CEO, the formal acceptance of Nexus's offer, each represented not just a professional milestone, but a personal one as well. After years of deliberately constraining my ambitions and capabilities to prove my worth through struggle rather than connection, I was finally stepping fully into my potential. Eleanor's words from our first discussion about the summit echoed in my mind. Your brilliance doesn't diminish just because you hide it. How true that had proven to be. By finally allowing myself to demonstrate what I was truly capable of, I had created opportunities that years of self-imposed limitations had blocked. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: I would never again make myself smaller to make others comfortable with my success. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. The tech industry, where the solution to ignoring women's expertise is to find a man who knows less about the problem. I couldn't help laughing, despite the seriousness of the situation. The irony is that if he had simply supported my leadership from the beginning, Sentinel would be functioning perfectly, and Vertex would still have Meridian's contract securely in place. Some lessons are learned too late to be useful, Eleanor observed. Though in this case, Bradley's loss is decidedly Nexus's gain. She gestured toward a folder on the coffee table. "Jack had this delivered while you were dealing with Jessica. Preliminary terms for your position at Nexus, including the equity component. He suggested you review it tonight so we can discuss any concerns in the morning." As I skimmed the document, my eyes widened at the compensation figures and the outlined scope of authority. The position, Director of Advanced AI Solutions, included not just technical leadership, but strategic input on company direction and product development. The equity stake was substantial, the salary generous, and most importantly, the role description emphasized innovation and architectural integrity over short-term market considerations. "This is..." I trailed off, searching for the right word. "Recognition of your true value," Eleanor completed the thought. "Both as a technical innovator and as a strategic thinker. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to fully embrace the possibilities opening before me. Not as someone hiding her light to prove her worth through struggle, but as someone stepping confidently into the role she was meant to play, all along." "I think it's time to make some calls," I said, reaching for my phone with newfound determination. Morning at Alpine Ridge brought crystalline mountain air and a sense of possibility that matched my newfound clarity. I woke early, spending an hour reviewing Nexus's offer documents and making notes on specific points to discuss with Jack. The terms were generous beyond expectation, but a few details regarding team structure and development priorities needed refinement. A text from Eleanor informed me she was already in meetings with resort staff and would join me for the scheduled discussion with Jack later that morning. I used the quiet time to call Nate, who answered immediately despite the early hour. "Please tell me you're calling with good news," he said instead of a greeting. "Things are apocalyptic here." "Define apocalyptic," I replied, settling onto the suite's balcony with my coffee. "Complete system failure," Nate explained, his voice low as though concerned about being overheard. "Sentinel isn't just making errors now, it's entirely non-responsive. The external consultant Bradley hired made some streamlining modifications that basically lobotomized the core processing module." I winced, imagining the cascading failures that would result from such changes. "How's the team handling it?" Everyone's working around the clock, but without you, it's like trying to reassemble a watch in the dark while wearing mittens." His frustration was palpable, even through the phone. "Half the team is ready to walk out, especially after Bradley blamed the external consultant, who then blamed Jessica, who then blamed your documentation." The pattern was all too familiar, a chain of deflected responsibility that never reached the true source of the problem. Bradley's decision to remove me from my own team. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this," I told Nate sincerely. "Don't be sorry, be my new boss," he replied without hesitation. "Whatever you're doing next, I want in." Several others from the team feel the same way. His loyalty was touching, but complicated my already complex situation. "Things are evolving quickly," I acknowledged carefully. "I may have opportunities. Soon that would include building a new team. But for now, I need you to keep this conversation confidential." "Understood," Nate agreed. "Just don't forget us little people when you're running your own AI empire." After ending the call, I spent some time drafting technical specifications for the Meridian proposal Jack had mentioned. If we were going to offer an alternative to Sentinel, it needed to showcase the full capabilities of the Carter-Chen model while addressing the specific needs Meridian had expressed during our dinner conversation. At precisely 10 o'clock, discreet knock on my door announced Jack's arrival for our scheduled meeting. He entered with the confident ease that characterized his approach to business, carrying a leather portfolio and a tablet. "Good morning, Alex," he greeted me warmly. "I trust you had time to review the preliminary offer?" "I did," I confirmed, gesturing toward the balcony where I'd arranged comfortable seating for our discussion. "The terms are extremely generous." Jack settled into one of the chairs, setting his materials on the small table between us. They reflect the value we place on your expertise and vision. Did you have any specific concerns or questions? For the next hour, we engaged in the kind of straightforward, respectful negotiation that had been conspicuously absent during my time at Vertex. Jack listened attentively to my thoughts on team structure and development priorities, making notes and offering thoughtful responses to each point. When we disagreed on an approach, the discussion remained focused on substance rather than ego or politics. "I think we've addressed the major points," Jack concluded as we wrapped up. "Legal will incorporate these revisions into the final agreement for your review. In the meantime, let's discuss the Meridian situation." He opened his tablet, revealing a preliminary draft of a proposal for Meridian Global. Our team worked through the night on this. It outlines a comprehensive replacement for their current system, leveraging the full capabilities you demonstrated yesterday. The document was impressively detailed, covering technical architecture, implementation timeline, and integration strategy. Most significantly, it explicitly named me as the lead architect and technical authority for the project, a stark contrast to how my contributions had been minimized at Vertex. "This looks solid," I remarked, genuinely impressed by the thoroughness. "Though I'd suggest some refinements to the language processing implementation specifics." Jack handed me a stylus. "Please, make any changes you feel are necessary. This is your domain of expertise." As I annotated the document, adding technical details and clarifying architectural approaches, Jack received a call that he stepped away to take. When he returned, his expression had shifted to one of calculated interest. "That was Catherine Walsh from Meridian," he informed me. "They've officially notified Vertex of their intent to terminate the contract, citing sustained performance failures. They're requesting an expedited proposal from us, with particular emphasis on transition timeline and service continuity." The news shouldn't have been surprising given our dinner conversation, yet it still landed with unexpected impact. Despite everything, I had invested 5 years in building Sentinel, and hearing of its official failure stirred complicated emotions. "Are you comfortable proceeding with this?" Jack asked perceptively. "I understand you have history with the B project." I appreciated his sensitivity to the situation.